They still love you. You can feel it. Not in their words, but in the pauses between them. Not in what they say, but in what they never quite finish saying. There's a softness in their silence that still bends toward you. A flicker in their gaze that still lingers too long when no one's looking. Pisces, you know what love feels like, even when it hides. You know when someone's trying to let you go. But their energy keeps returning to you in dreams, in songs, in sudden memories that don't make sense but won't leave you alone. And lately you've felt it more intensely. That emotional echo, that invisible thread that refuses to sever. Even when logic says it's done. Even when time keeps moving forward, but your heart keeps looking over its shoulder. This isn't delusion. This isn't you being too sensitive. This is your gift, your burden, your beautiful curse. You feel what others can't admit. You hear what isn't said. And in love, that means you often carry the weight of both hearts, yours and theirs. So what if I told you, they still love you, but they're scared to admit it? Not because the love isn't real, but because it is. So real that it scares them. So deep that they ran. So familiar that it woke something in them they weren't ready to meet. And here's the cosmic part of it all. The part that explains why you've been feeling everything more vividly. Neptune, your ruling planet, has been moving through Pisces since 2012, intensifying your intuitive gifts, your dreams, your capacity to love without borders. But in 2025, that energy begins to climax. Because Saturn, the planet of commitment, structure, and emotional boundaries, is now in Pisces too. And this shift isn't light, it's karmic. It's asking you to sort what's fantasy from what's fate, to see clearly where you once loved blindly, to honor the feeling, but also respect your reality. This dance between Neptune and Saturn is playing out inside you like a slow storm. One part of you still believes in what could be. The other part is learning to love yourself even if it never becomes what you hoped. And in the middle, there's this ache, this sense that their heart is still tangled in yours, but something keeps them silent. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's timing, maybe it's a pattern they don't know how to break. But one thing is certain, you're not imagining the connection, and you're not the only one feeling it. So let's talk about it, not through astrology alone, not through logic, but through truth, the kind that Pisces always knows, even when the world calls it fiction. Because this is more than just a story about love lost. It's about the love that never stopped, the love that lingers, the love that still lives in both of you, even if no one's saying it out loud. You can feel it in the way their name still holds weight in your chest, not like an anchor pulling you down, but like a song that always plays a little too loud when you're alone. They still visit you, don't they? In flashes, in dreams, in energy. Sometimes it's in the way your phone lights up, and you think it might be them. Sometimes it's in the moment right before you fall asleep, when their face shows up. Not to haunt you, but to check in. They don't have to say a word. You just know. You feel their unrest like static, like the air has changed, like something in the universe is tilting in your direction, even if they're not physically near you, even if they haven't spoken your name in months, but you hear them, in your intuition, in the way your body tenses when they're thinking of you, even when your mind tries to move on. And what hurts the most is knowing they feel it too. But they won't say it. They won't reach. They won't break the silence. Not because they don't care, but because they care more than they know how to handle. They're afraid of what loving you would mean, afraid of losing themselves, afraid of being seen in ways they can't control. Because loving you, Pisces, is not soft. It's oceanic. It doesn't knock. It floods. It doesn't ask for permission. It takes root in their soul. And not everyone is ready for that. Not everyone is brave enough to surrender. So instead, they run. Or they pretend. Or they tell themselves the story that you were too much, when really you were everything. And here you are, still feeling, still open, still wondering if they'll ever turn back around, not because you need them, but because some part of you knows this story isn't finished. It doesn't feel over because it isn't. You don't feel them by accident. You don't carry this ache because you're weak. You carry it because you were never just loving their body. You were loving their soul. And souls don't forget. Not when they've been touched that deeply. Not when the love was real. Even now when they scroll past your name and pretend they don't pause. Even now when they speak of you vaguely, like you were just someone from the past. Even now when they distract themselves with everything that isn't healing, you are still the one they measure every almost love against. You are the one who saw them, not just the surface, but the parts they thought were unlovable, the cracks they tried to hide, the dreams they abandoned long ago. You touched those, and that kind of intimacy. It doesn't vanish. It hibernates. It waits, sometimes quietly, sometimes with a scream, but always. It remembers. But here's where it gets dangerous, Pisces. Not because of them, but because of what your heart might do with all this silence. There's a moment, always, when longing starts to masquerade as truth, when your softness tries to justify their absence, when your love, so unconditional, begins to bend into fantasy. And that's the edge you're walking now, because you can feel their love, yes, but don't let that become a reason to wait forever. Don't let their fear become your full-time ache. Sometimes the connection is real, but the timing is not. Sometimes the bond is soul deep, but the person hasn't grown enough to meet you there. And no matter how much you feel them, dream of them, carry them, you can't do both sides of the love story alone. This is where the pain sharpens. Because Pisces doesn't fall in love halfway. You fall all the way, into the hidden places, into the wounds, into the potential that no one else sees. And when that love doesn't return the same depth, you don't just feel rejection, you feel abandonment by a destiny you believed in. So let this be your sacred truth. Yes, they still love you. Yes, the connection is real. Yes, their heart pulls toward you even now. But unless they choose courage, unless they choose healing, unless they choose you, out loud and in the light, that love will stay locked behind a door you weren't meant to break open. And here's the deepest ache of all, Pisces, you could wait. You could hold that space forever. But the cost would be your own blooming. Because while you're waiting for them to remember how to speak their heart, you're forgetting how to fully live yours. That's not love. That's sacrifice. And your soul wasn't built to bleed silently. It was built to sing, to heal, to hold, but also to receive. So what if this ache isn't meant to be solved? What if it's meant to expand you, to deepen your well, not drown you in it? What if the whole point of this connection was to awaken your knowing that your love was never the problem? It was just too real for someone still hiding from their own reflection. And what if you stopped trying to prove your heart's worth to someone who already knows, but doesn't yet know how to honor it? What if your love was the mirror, and what they saw in it terrified them, because they saw themselves, not as they are, but as they could be, if they finally stepped into that kind of depth? Not everyone is ready for that. And that's not a flaw in you. That's a reflection of how rare you are, how profoundly you feel, how bravely you still believe, even in a world addicted to pretending. But belief needs boundaries, and dreams need grounding, because when Neptune and Saturn move through your sign together, you're being asked not just to love big, but to love wisely, to discern between energy that nourishes and energy that only lingers. Because not all echoes mean return. Some echoes are meant to remind you, you once reached that deeply, and you survived. You're still here, still full, still soft, but no longer naive. And maybe that's the real growth. Not hardening, not closing, but choosing yourself, even when you could wait, even when your heart still whispers their name, even when the connection lives on. Because love can still be real, and still be incomplete. So what now, Pisces? You've felt everything. You've held both sides of the story. You've loved without needing to own. You've remembered for both of you. And now, you get to remember yourself. Not the version of you who waited, not the one who kept hope quiet in the corner of your chest, but the one who deserves reciprocity. The one who feels deeply and deserves to be met. Because you're not here to prove your devotion. You're here to embody it, for yourself first. To pour all that tenderness back into the places inside you that waited for someone else to arrive and hold them. So let's start there. With you. With choosing to come home to your own heart. To build a sanctuary inside it. One that doesn't close its doors in grief, but reopens them, this time with wisdom. Let yourself write the letter you never sent, not to give it to them, but to give it to yourself. To clear the ache, to honor the truth, to see on the page the magnitude of what you were willing to feel for someone who couldn't meet you where you stood. Let yourself walk barefoot somewhere quiet, not to forget, but to return to your intuition, to the part of you that always knew, but needed space to speak louder than hope. Let yourself unfollow the idea that love means waiting, love means witnessing, and if they can't witness you, in your fullness, in your flaws, in your fire and your ocean, then maybe they weren't ready for the kind of love you came here to live. Let yourself feel the missing, but not become it. Let yourself mourn the potential, but not marry it. Let yourself grieve what was good, without pretending it was enough. Because the moment you do, the moment you allow that space to clear, something shifts, a current moves, and new energy finds you. Someone who doesn't flinch at the intensity of your gaze. Someone who doesn't run when things get real. Someone who doesn't confuse softness with instability, but recognizes it as strength. Because you've never been too much, Pisces. You've been deeply attuned in a world that's still afraid to listen. But now, you listen to you. Now you move with discernment. Now you pause not from fear, but from knowing your worth being met, not chased. So the next time you feel them lingering, the next time their energy brushes up against yours in a song, a scent, a memory, smile. Not because you're waiting, but because you loved well. And that love lives on in how you now treat yourself. That's the real legacy of what you gave. It didn't die, it redirected, and now it's returning home, to you. So here you are, not waiting, not wondering, just breathing, softer, just standing, clearer, just being whole. You don't need closure to close. You don't need a confession to feel complete. You don't need them to come back to validate the depth of what you gave. Because Pisces, the love was always real. And that's what makes you powerful. Not because it ended perfectly, but because you didn't end with it. You kept loving. You kept healing. You kept soft. And that softness is your revolution. You walk through this world with a heart wide open, even after heartbreak tried to convince you to shut it down. You choose to feel, even when it would be easier to numb. You choose to believe in what's beautiful, even when reality tests you over and over. That's not naivety. That's devotion. That's soul stamina. That's the kind of strength only a Pisces understands. The courage to stay tender in a world that taught you to armor up. And maybe they'll never say the words. Maybe their fear will always be louder than their love. Maybe their silence will stretch into a lifetime of almosts. But your story doesn't end there. It never did. Because the chapter you're entering now is not about proving you're worthy. It's about becoming a sanctuary for your own tenderness, a witness to your own longing, a partner to your own magic. So if this message found you when you were doubting, let this be your confirmation. They still love you, but they're scared. And that's their journey, not your job. You are allowed to move forward with grace. You are allowed to release the ache without erasing the memory. You are allowed to bless what was and still choose what's next. So take this breath, this moment, this quiet, and come back to yourself. Say it gently, like a prayer whispered to the waves. I honor the love, I honor the truth, and I choose me now. Let that be your return, not to them, but to the future you're finally ready to feel. And if this message touched your heart, not for them, but for you, let it ripple. Leave a comment, light a candle, write their name and release it, not to hold on, but to let go with love. Because that's the most Pisces thing you can do. Feel everything and still choose peace. And if you're still here, reading, feeling, breathing with me, then this isn't just about them anymore. This is about you, your resilience, your sacred softness, the part of you that keeps showing up even when love goes silent, even when the story doesn't end the way you dreamed. Because you didn't just fall in love, you became it. You let it move through you like moonlight on water, gentle, glowing, healing everything it touched, even the parts they left behind. And that's not something they could ever take away from you. That kind of love leaves a mark, not a wound, but a signature. Proof that you were there, that your heart spoke, that your soul reached out and tried. And now, it's time to write the next chapter, not in rebellion, not in retreat, but in reverence for all the versions of you who waited. So maybe, just for tonight, you imagine this. You're walking alone near the ocean. The sky is ink and indigo. The stars hum softly above you, and the tide moves like a lullaby you forgot you knew by heart. You stop, you breathe, and in that silence you hear them. Not their voice, but the echo of what they never said. And instead of wishing they'd finally say it, you whisper back, "Thank you. Thank you for waking me up to how deeply I can feel. Thank you for showing me what I deserve. Thank you for being the mirror I didn't want, but maybe needed. Thank you for being the almost that brought me back to myself." And then you keep walking. Not because you've moved on in a cold or careless way, but because your spirit finally knows. You were always the ending and the beginning. You were always the love that lingered and the light that returns. So when love comes again, and it will, you'll meet it with new eyes, eyes that see clearly. A heart that no longer bends to fit what isn't ready. Arms that are open, not because they're empty, but because they're full. Of truth, of tenderness, of you. And if they ever return? If one day they knock on your door again, this time with words they were once too afraid to say? You'll listen, you'll feel, but you won't shrink, you won't wait. You won't lose yourself to longing, because now you've remembered. Love isn't about who comes back. It's about who stays. And that includes you. So if this message felt like it was written in your language, that's because it was. You are Pisces, ruled by dreams, by oceans, by knowing beyond logic. And what you've just done, feeling this fully, letting go this gently, is not weakness. It's divine courage. Let it echo in you now, not as a wound, but as a song. A new rhythm your soul can dance to. And when you're ready, write it down, sing it aloud. Share it with someone else who's still learning how to choose themselves after a love that couldn't. Be the wave, be the moonlight, be the healing. And if tonight feels heavy again, come back here, read it again, feel it all again, and then rise. Because this was never just a love story, it was a soul story. And yours, dear Pisces, is still being written.